So 3.3 is criticisms of the three circles model. So before this, I thought that this whole section, this three number section, would be about the three circles model, but no, it was critical responses to we and the three circles model. So up until now, 3.1 and 3.2, we did touch on Kachru, and we did talk about how Kachru was influential in talking about super diversity mixing. So those things, he was among the first scholars in world Englishes, right? So he paved the way. And now we turn to his specific model, the three circles model. And in a few videos earlier, I think 2 videos earlier, part 7, I showed a model of the three circles. I showed the three circles model. I showed a picture of that and discussed it in brief. You can watch it. So let's read from here. We now turn to specific criticisms of the three circles model. A cornerstone of the World English's paradigm is Braj Kachru's influential typology of the context of English use across the globe, the three circles model. In this model, the distinctive features of English are explained in terms of its use as a native language, which is the inner circle, for example, in America, Britain. Then number 2, as a second language with a wide range of intranational roles. So people who speak English, or who use English, who are taught English as a second language, right? So, and these are for international rules, for communicating with each other as a second language. Their mother tongue is there, and also English is there. So for example, India gives English, has given English an official status. So India is an example of the outer circle. And as a foreign or international language. So here English is taught as a foreign language, EFL, or an international language. For example, China doesn't have a colonial past of British colonial past, so it's in the expanding circle. Still they do use English, but it's for international communication, not for communication within their country. It's not required. The differences in the linguistic and cultural ecology of the three circles, including, so they're giving examples of the differences. For example, what English is used for and with whom, and how it is taught and learned, how it complements or interacts with with users' other languages. So these are some examples of the different ways how the inner circle, expanding circle, and the outer circle, they are different from each other. Account for the evolution and characterizations of world Englishes, such as their formal differences, varietal range, functional roles, discourse types, acquisitional processes, creative innovations, and pedagogic standards and attitudes. So pedagogic refers to language teaching. So anything about teaching is pedagogic. So here it's referring to language teaching. So how is it different? So we already touched on this, that if the students are in an ESL context, so it's in the expanding circle, right? For example, in India, in the outer circle, not the expanding circle, outer circle. For example, in India, English is an official language in India, though of course the primary language is Hindi, and there is a lot of linguistic variation also. There are many languages in India, about thousands of languages in India, and English is one of the official languages there. So there in India, as in many other countries like Malaysia, Singapore, English is taught as a second language, and for those students, they are not actually taught like American or England students, right, or English students. They are not taught the same way. And of course, Chinese students, Korean students, Japanese students, they are also taught in a different way, because their foundations are different, their purpose is different, because they use it for international communication, right? Only when it's required for international language, for international communication. And whereas in the outer circle, sometimes you have to use it with each other. For example, some jobs require English, besides international jobs of course, which always or most always do require English. And the inner circle is the mother tongue is English, so obviously English is taught differently there. So besides this pedagogic standards and attitudes, there are also other differences like acquisitional processes. In Japan, in China, English is acquired in a different way. We cannot say that a Bangladeshi study is representative of how a Chinese bilingual or a Chinese child learns English as a second language, right? And we also cannot say that it is representative of how an American child learns their second language. So there are significant differences among people who are in the inner circle, the expanding circle, and the outer circle. So these are other differences: evolution, characteristics, varietal ranges. Alright. One criticism of the three circles is that the model suffers from being based in a political/historical view of English worldwide, and thus fails to capture transplantations of the language in locations not formally recorded by colonial history. So obviously, where English has made its mark, like it was said that the sun never set on the British Empire. That being said, of course, the British Empire didn't conquer the whole world, right? So the whole world, not every country has a British colonial past. Still, they are using English, right? For example, the Japanese, the Chinese, they do use English, but for limited reasons, for international communication. But Kachru didn't go into depth about these language uses. So that's one criticism. One would have thought that the fact that the three circles model is based in a political historical view of English worldwide is a strength rather than a weakness. However, the authors Sridhar and let me check the names, sorry. Sridhar, it's not Sridhar. So Sridhar and Sridhar, they feel that it's actually a strength that Kachru is taking into account the political and the historical view of English rather than discounting them. Like if you discount politics and geography and history, geography is not mentioned here, but if you discount history and politics, then how can you actually categorize English? Will you just say that people who are in America use a different type of English, who are in Australia use a different type of English, in Bangladesh a different type of English? Would you say that, or would you rather have a political element there? There are other there are other models that depict the spread of English. Here only Kachru's three circles model is discussed, but other models, some models only take geography into account. For example, they say that in the West this type of English is used, in the East this type of English is used, in South Asia this type of English is used. But Kachru, he has not focused on specifically geography but also politics and history. So Sridhar and Sridhar, they are saying that this is actually a strength, not a weakness. Okay, so this is their rebuttal, this is their response to this criticism that that some people feel that political and historical views do not actually explain how English has spread to areas where there was no colonial past. But the writers considered it as a strength because it at least, even though it is not enough to completely explain the spread of English, it is an important part, right? We cannot deny this. As is widely known, there are more non-native users than native users, speakers of English globally, and of these the largest proportion of regular and heavy users of English are from South and Southeast Asia and Africa, former colonies of the British Empire. So excuse me. So obviously the colonial past is very important, right? Yes, it's not the case that it's 100% important, like if there was no colonial past, English wouldn't have been used anywhere at all. It's not like that, but of course it was extremely beneficial for the spread of English. If there was no colonial past, if the British did not go about conquering lands, so English most probably would not have spread like this. 99% you can say, right? So politics has of course been a huge boon for the spread of English. No model of English worldwide can hope to begin to explain the phenomenon without recognizing this central political/historical fact. So again, the writers are saying that the historical and political fact is extremely important for explaining the spread of English. It explains not only the history of the introduction and expansion of the roles of English, but also aspects such as its post-colonial status, roles, attitudinal preferences among models, and the linguistic features of the varieties that have developed in these contexts. So, if the colonial past is important not only because of its surface level importance, there is not only a surface level importance, but because of the dialect that was used in the colonies. For example, since British people ruled in India, for example, so there was more of a British accent that developed in the Indians. So of course there was also Indian flavor to the accents as well as the vocabulary, grammar, structure. There are some differences, but the main difference in the but now I can say that the Indian English is completely different from British English. The accent is completely unique, but there are of course links to its colonial past, and not only surface level links but also specific links such as attitudinal preferences among models and the linguistic features of the varieties. So the linguistic particular features that developed in Indian English, in Singapore English, those were also influenced by the politics and the history of its past. History means its past. So, as for the claim that the model, quote unquote, fails to capture transplantations of the language in locations not formally recorded by colonial history, it should be noted that the World English's Journal is open to all perspectives and has published on English in an unprecedented variety of locales and topics, as Kingsley Bolton and Daniel Davis show in their analysis of the journal's content over the previous 10 years. So the journal where they are writing for Sridhar and Sridhar, this article, this issue is for the World English Journal, as we discussed. So this journal is dedicated to actually represent the entire world's Englishes, as the name suggests. So Kachru's three circles, it's not actually a fault of Kachru's three circles, but Sridhar and Sridhar, they are inviting more and more papers, more and more research studies on world Englishes of the quote unquote third world countries, as we've already discussed. This is not to say that there are many aspects of English in areas that were not British colonies that need to be studied. So besides British colonies, of course, we also need to study Chinese English, right? Korean English. However, a model should be judged on its insights and explanatory power rather than its alleged shortcomings and in relation to available alternatives. So they are defending Kachru's three circles model by saying that yes, it's not perfect, it didn't represent everything. However, it's quite good, or even the best when compared with other available alternatives. So this is one point, and another point is that they positively look at Kachru's three models. Here they say a model should be judged on its insights and explanatory power rather than its alleged shortcomings. So they are quite positive in their critique. They want to highlight the positives rather than focus on the negatives. We can highlight this here, and in relation to, we can also highlight this. These are the two defenses, and another defense was that political and historical views, they are very important. So these are three responses to one criticism of the three circles model. But the paragraph isn't finished, the section isn't finished. Let us carry on. It has also been suggested that the World English's model should move away from a focus on nation states in favor of a socio-linguistic focus on English-speaking communities wherever they are found. So instead of, for example, studying Bangladeshi English, so some people think that instead of specifically focus on one region, one country, on one nation, so world Englishes should rather focus on the speakers, on all this Bangladeshi, not Bangladeshi, but Bengali, all the Bengali speakers of the world, wherever they are from. Yes, the majority of Bengalis are from Bangladesh, but there are other Bengalis. There are lakhs of Bengalis in other countries as well, in Canada, in New York, in Australia. So we should also study them along with the Bengalis present in Bangladesh. So this is what many people say today, that we shouldn't just focus on one nation state, but rather all the members of the speech community. So this is not only for Bangladesh, obviously. So when we talk about any other speech community, it can be Hindi people, right, Hindi speaking people, it can be English speaking people, not English speaking people because we are talking about English. So Hindi people who speak English as a second language, or Bengali who speak English as a second language, or any other people, or Malaysians who speak English as a second language, not necessarily all from Malaysia. Okay, so this is another criticism, a criticism that is sometimes uncritically repeated, but Sridhar and Sridhar say that actually this is not critically said by most scholars. They just repeat this criticism and say that this is one of the criticisms of the three circles model. Here we would point out that Kachru's identification of varieties was never based on political units but rather on sound sociolinguistic criteria. So actually Kachru, when he identified the varieties, he didn't actually look at he specifically looked at sociolinguistic criteria, not rather political units. But yes, he considered politics, but the main focus was sociolinguistic criteria. So it is not fair to condemn, to say that Kachru didn't look at sociolinguistic criteria. For example, he uses the term South Asian English, SAE, as a cover term to refer to Indian, Pakistani, Bangladesh and other Englishes. So Kachru didn't actually say that Bangladeshi English is part of the outer circle, Indian English is part of the outer circle, but rather he said that South Asian English as a whole. Okay, so let me highlight this as a cover term. So he actually did refer to speech communities instead of nation states. So when we talk about nation states, inevitably politics come in. Inevitably there are a lot of there may be disputes because of, one example I'll give is Kashmir. All right, and another example is Israel, Pakistan, Palestine. So you see there are a lot of political disputes that can come from only looking at geographical areas on nation states. So it's better, and it's also more fair to think to categorize based on sociolinguistic data, and Kachru did do that. Okay, because they share features such as retroflex sounds, reduplication and so on, reflecting the well-documented substratum or India as a linguistic area features due to millennia of convergence. So here they're saying that there are a lot of technical similarities between the English spoken by Indian people, Pakistani people, Bangladeshi people, right? So yes, of course there are differences. There are differences between Indian English and Bangladeshi English, but there are a lot of similarities. So we can group them as a single term, South Asian English. And in cases of what may appear to be national varieties, the arguments are based on sociolinguistic factors. So these are the most important factors, sociolinguistic factors. Right, Kachru did focus on this, as in Singaporean English, and /or linguistic factors, as in the case of Japanese or Thai English. So both sociolinguistic and linguistic factors matter. So sociolinguistic factors, they refer to the societal norms, societal rules, and linguistic factors refer to the specific way that language is used, right? So there are a lot of technical things like grammatical, syntactical. So those types of elements are called linguistic factors. So Japanese and Thai English they are very different from other types of English because of syntactical differences, vocabulary differences, but sociolinguistic factors, these are more subtle and more related to the society. So the South Asian English is normally has a similar sociolinguistic factors, but the linguistic factors are quite different from Japanese English. So South Asian English does not cover Japan or Thai English. Elsewhere too, for example in West and East Africa, sociolinguistic factors such as shared educational policies and practices, for example the choice of English medium, direct method, strategies of lexical development and so on, rather than political boundaries that shape the national varieties. Clearly, the use of nation-state terminology is a shorthand. it is superfluous, which means it's hollow, it's not very deep, it's not adequate to remind ourselves of the fact that the definition of nation states in terms of a single language or religion, a legacy of European colonialism, is particularly unsuited to describe the diverse communities of Asia and Africa. So here in this paragraph, let's take a short note. So in this paragraph, Sridhar 2018 address the criticism that Kachru did not focus on sociolinguistic criteria but rather political ideas. However, Sridhar 2018, we should always mention the year, okay, year of publication whenever we are quoting from writers, whenever we are mentioning writers. However, Sridhar 2018 point out that rather than nation states, Kachru did categorize the world Englishes by focusing on socio-linguistic and linguistic criteria. Alright, so the criticism was that Kachru didn't focus on socio-linguistic criteria, but the fact was that he actually did. So there was some misunderstanding of some critics. They didn't critically analyze the situation, and Sridhar pointed this out. Okay, so we have two more paragraphs. Yet another criticism is that, quote, because the model promotes specific varieties, the model also ignores variation within locales, especially where the gap between those who know English and those who do not is vast. Okay, so what this means is that, suppose that India is said to be from the outer circle in Kachru's three circles model. Okay, so but India has such a large population. It has about 1.4 billion people. About that statistic, it has about 1,400 million people, 1.4 billion people in the country, right? So do you think that everyone speaks English as a second language? Of course not, right? Not even half, or maybe we can say half, but not even close to this amount of people speak English as a second language. And even if some people, like, even if you say that, yeah, about half of that population can understand English, okay, but that's not English as a second language, but English as a foreign language. You can say they just know enough to communicate just bits and pieces. Like they can say that they can just introduce themselves, or maybe they can just say their name, one or two sentences. So this language proficiency is quite low. It's elementary level, right? So when Kachru gave examples of nations which were in the outer circle, he mentioned India, and even not India, even consider Bangladesh, this small country. Do you think that every one of us is learning English as a second language or has proficiency as a second language? No, of course not. Not even the people of Dhaka, right? In Dhaka, we can say that our language proficiency is quite like, the context is quite ESL based, like ESL context. We are learning English to communicate within ourselves as well as internationally. But the rural people, rural areas of Bangladesh, they are not so privileged, right, to study like this, and the standards are quite low. So of course this model ignores variation within locales, within the countries that are mentioned. So this is very clear to everyone, right? So anyone can see that Kachru didn't go into very specific depth about his examples. Let's see what Sridhar respond. First, the model is not intended to promote any specific variety. It only advocates, means it only speaks for choice based on pragmatic considerations. The energetic elaboration of outer circle varieties is a reaction to their neglect and marginalization in the ELT and SLA literature. So here the authors say that actually it isn't promoting any specific variety. It isn't promoting that Indian English and Bangladeshi English, even though many people do not use English as a second language. Still, he puts Bangladesh as a part of the outer circle instead of the expanding circle. Why does he do this? Does he do this because he is promoting Bangladeshi English? No, exactly. So he did this because he was rather optimistic, right? He wanted to promote marginalized English varieties and say that and those were marginalized also in the ELT and SLA literature, which means that very few research studies had been done, and still the amount of research studies that have been done in Bangladesh regarding ELT, SLA, world Englishes, it's still not very much in quantity. So when Kachru was writing, this was especially much more the case. So he wanted to put us on the map, and not only us but also other countries that he put in the outer circle. Second, this criticism is indeed ironical, since Kachru introduced the concept of decline of bilingualism in the 1960s to refer to the variation non-native varieties such as Indian English. So he actually made the circles by acknowledging the idea that there are so many variations of English. That's why he made the circles to represent the main types of English, the main three types: ESL, EFL, native variety, outer circle, expanding circle, inner circle. So he actually made the circles. One of the primary reasons was because he wanted the concept of the decline of bilingualism, or he wanted bilingualism and multilingualism to be the norm, or at least to let there be nothing to be the norm, because in the past, as we've discussed, monolingualism was the norm, and Kachru wrote against that. He has repeatedly drawn attention to the existence of a vast range of sub-varieties such as Babu English, Boxwala English. He has also remarked that one can easily identify at least a dozen mother tongue based sub-varieties of Indian English. So remember, he studied Indian English, South Asian Indian English, right, in the 1960s and 70s. So such as Tamil English, Bengali English, and Malayali English. Numerous studies have been published on the range of Englishes, especially at the lower end of the decline of bilingualism, such as Nigerian Pidgin English in World Englishes and many reference works of World Englishes. So the answer to the criticism that Kachru's three circles of World English doesn't actually cater to many variations. So Kachru actually, of course, he knew about the variations. He studied Indian English, and he said that there was at least a dozen mother tongue based sub varieties of Indian English. So Indian English itself had at least a dozen sub varieties such as Tamil English, Bengali English. So yes, he was obviously aware of this, and he wrote about it. And of course, in his three circles model, he couldn't give so many details, right, as he could in a paper. So in the three circles model, it was simplistic, but it wasn't too much simplistic, because there were at least examples. There were three circles. There was detail about intra-national use and international use. So I think, and Sridhar, these writers also think that this is not a worthy criticism. Some critics allege, means they say, they put forward the allegation that the World English's paradigm does not recognize the performative dimension, the use of a range of linguistic resources to signal affiliations that operate simultaneously at global, regional, national, and local levels, and the use of mixed codes, which comes not from the use of different L1s and L2s, means first languages and second languages, but from the language becoming the lingua franca of the workplace. So it's a very big sentence. So what it means, it's a quote actually from Pennycook. So here what the writers mean is that another criticisms is another criticism is that um, uh, as we said that code switching happens, code mixing happens. We speak in the same sentence there may be there may be 2, 3 or even more languages used together in the same conversation. It's probably not always, not even always, it's probably most often not the case that we only speak in one language, right? Even when we speak in Bangla, we sprinkle in some English words and vice versa. So the three circles model, it doesn't talk about this at all. So this is one of the other criticisms. So Sridhar responds by saying this: World Englishes is unique among the SLA and sociolinguistic paradigms that incorporate data from a wide range of genres, speech acts, and speech events, from personal letters and religious discourses to parliamentary debates and matrimonial advertisements, from interpersonal transactions to creative writing by non-native users directed at regional as well as global audiences. So Sridhar and Sridhar say that no, actually World Englishes does not just talk about the surface level information. It doesn't only conduct research about what language a specific type of community is using, but they also, World English literature, the World English scholars, they also go deep into very specific genres. For example, personal letters, religious discourses. So these specific contexts, these are also studied in World Englishes. So it cannot be a criticism that Kachru did not touch on this, as it's actually Sridhar and Sridhar are actually quoting Kachru here. So Kachru himself said that World Englishes talk about these things. So Kachru was obviously aware of these. Studies of code switching and code mixing starting in the 1970s have explicitly, means very clearly, drawn attention to the fact that the mixed hybrid codes have always been used to index a simultaneously locally grounded identity as well as a liberal progressive cosmopolitan identity. So here Sridhar and Sridhar are citing one of their authors, one of their own. So here it says that hybrid codes were always there. We've also talked about this one before, and simultaneously two things are going on. One is that there is a local grounded identity. For example, Bangladeshi English, we have a local Bangladeshi flavor, especially Indian English has a local English flavor, but there is also a liberal progressive cosmopolitan identity. Cosmopolitan is like the whole world, a citizen of the world, cosmo and politan, so a citizen of the world. So here it means that we do have a specific identity that is rooted in our cultures, but at the same time we are also not just shutting ourselves off and just staying in one place. We are also connecting with other people. So there are two things going on here. So there is a hybridization happening, right? We do adopt the foreign culture and we also change that foreign culture by incorporating some of our own, by injecting some of our own elements, cultural elements. So nothing is gained, but nothing is lost, all is gained. Recent studies such as Indian English as a bilingual language have elaborated this use of mixed code to express a hybrid outlook. That said, we acknowledged that some criticisms of the scope and substance of research World English's paradigm are well founded and demand constructive response. For example, there have been far fewer empirically sound controlled studies of the acquisitional aspects in World Englishes compared to what we find in the linguistic cognitive model of SLA, a point we noted in the 1980s, as also noted by Mestri and Bhatt 2008 and others. So here actually the writers Sridhar and Sridhar, they are actually giving a criticism of their own. They're saying that World Englishes isn't actually conducting research empirically. Lack of empirical research in World Englishes. So this is a criticism that Sridhar and Sridhar themselves are making. So there is scope to do more empirical researches. So empirical, right? So more field studies, more. So instead of secondary resources, the empirical studies are when the researcher goes out and collects data on his or her own. Yet another area in need of attention is expansion of the model to better integrate pidgins and creoles. So pidgins and creoles, they are also ignored or neglected, right? You know what pidgins and creoles are? Pidgins is a contact language which was used as a lingua franca, like it's a mixture of English and another language. So, and Creole is a second generation or a third generation pidgin. When the pidgin becomes so used, so common, that the second generation people or the sons or the grandsons, grandchildren of the people who established pidgin, when the newborns also start learning that pidgin as their mother tongue, that becomes a Creole. So pidgin is the first level of a new type of language, of a new combination of English and another language, and Creole is when the pidgin becomes established. However, since pidgins and Creoles are not like quote unquote standard English is, so people have been neglecting them. Most scholars have been neglecting them until some years ago, some decades ago. So there is still a lack of research in pidgins and Creoles and about related to world Englishes here. Also, it is true that in several cases, accounts of varieties of English have tended to be more descriptive than theoretically oriented. So theoretical frameworks have not been used in much of the research studies. So that is another limitation that Sridhar say. So research studies can be descriptive, like they collected data and then they describe what they found, or the research studies can also be theoretically oriented, that they are testing a theory, or they are adopting a theory that another person made, another renowned person made, and then applying that theory to their findings. So theoretically oriented research studies, you can say, are more organized, are more thought out rather than descriptive, but it's not always the case. However, it should be kept in mind that many of these studies are the very first descriptions of hitherto, means until now, undocumented phenomena, and thus contribute valuable new data for theorization. So descriptive data, as I said, it's not always the case that descriptive data is worse or inferior to theoretically oriented research, especially because these descriptions are the very first descriptions of hitherto undocumented phenomena. So many countries, so even Bangladesh has a limited ELT and other world Englishes. These fields are relatively not very much low, but relatively not much researched in Bangladesh when compared to especially first world countries and also India. So when the first types of studies that came about us, about other countries like Malaysia, Singapore, so in those research studies, in the very first research studies, descriptions are actually good, because we want to know how actually our people talk, our people think about language. So descriptions are so this is a defense of Sridhar's own criticism. Sridhar and Sridhar criticized WE that there is not much theoretical oriented data and research, but they also defend world Englishes by saying that sometimes, especially at the first signs of research in a country, descriptions are actually good. It is important to note that despite these and other criticisms, the three circles model continues to be influential for its fundamental insights into challenges posed by the globalization of English for traditional models of sociolinguistics. So despite the criticisms that Sridhar and Sridhar have outlined, so despite this, in spite of the criticisms, in spite of the many criticisms that the three circles model has, still you can say that it is the most important, influential spread of English model that there is. So Kachru's, that theory, this three circles model, despite it being so widely controversial, and it was established in 1980 something, so still it is holding strong. And also there are also many defenses, like Sridhar defended it. So yes, it is still influential. Many of the insights of this model and the world English's paradigm in general have been fruitfully incorporated in a number of attempts to structure the global uses of English, such as English as a lingua franca, English as an international language. So yeah, let's go to the conclusion, the last video